The cold wind whipped through this abandoned prison, its eerie howl like the wails of the forgotten souls trapped within its crumbling walls. The once formidable structure now stood empty, a decaying testament to the horrors that had unfolded within. The prisoners who had once occupied its cells were long gone, but something sinister remained. The place wasn't just haunted by restless spirits, it was haunted by something far darker, something real. This was no mere tale of ghostly whispers and shadows in the night. This was a story of crime, of betrayal, and of a man who had committed an unspeakable act under the guise of something far more sinister. The story began with Detective James Owens, a man with a reputation for getting to the truth, no matter how tangled or dangerous the case might be. Owens had been investigating a string of disappearances tied to the prison for months. Though everyone thought the old building was abandoned, forgot him by all but the most daring ghost hunters. But Owens knew better. He'd received the tip that there was more to this than mere superstition, and when he arrived, he realized just how deep the darkness went. It wasn't just the chilling reports of eerie noises or cold spots in the hallways. There had been a string of mysterious deaths, all linked to the prison, but no one could explain how or why these people were dying. The victims were often connected to the prison in some way: former guards, ex-prisoners, or even families of those who'd been locked away. Each death seemed inexplicable, as if fate itself was playing a cruel joke. Owens had never been a superstitious man, but as he walked through the rotting corridors of the prison, he couldn't ignore the feeling that he was being watched. His footsteps echoed in the silence, and the further he ventured, the colder it became. He arrived at the prison's notorious Cell 47, the one that everyone whispered about, but no one dared to approach. The cell had a reputation, a dark history. It was said that every man who had been locked inside had either died under mysterious circumstances or disappeared without a trace. Owens was no stranger to danger, but something in the air made him uneasy. As he stood in front of the cell, a chill ran down his spine. He knew this was where the answers lay. He stepped forward, his flashlight illuminating the heavy iron door. His heart raced, not from fear, but from the weight of what he was about to uncover. Inside the cell, the walls were covered in graffiti, old and faded. The air smelled of dampness and decay. But it wasn't the physical decay that bothered Owens. It was the feeling that the walls themselves had witnessed horrors far beyond what the human mind could comprehend. He'd heard the room's prisoners claim they could hear whispers in the dead of night, voices pleading for help, for release from something far worse than the prison itself. He was about to leave when something caught his eye. A small, handwritten note tucked behind a piece of loose brick. Owens pulled it free, his fingers trembling as he read the words scrawled in blood-red ink. "You can't stop it. You've already lost." The words sent a wave of cold through him. He felt the weight of the sentence as if it were a warning, not just to him, but to anyone who dared uncover the truth. Owens had been chasing shadows for months, but now he realized the shadows were real. There was someone responsible for the deaths, something far more human than a ghost. As Owens dug deeper, he uncovered a chilling pattern. The recent deaths had all been linked to a former prison guard, a man named John Blackwell. Blackwell had been known for his cruelty, a man who thrived on the suffering of others. But it wasn't until Owens reviewed the case files that he made a terrifying connection. Blackwell had been the last guard to work the night shift before the prison was shut down. And he had disappeared without a trace, just like so many others. Owens spent weeks tracking down any surviving witnesses, but each one seemed to know less than the last. The deeper he went, the more he realized just how many people were involved in the web of lies surrounding the prison. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been manipulating him all along, feeding him just enough information to keep him on the wrong trail. One evening, as Owens sat alone in his office, piecing together the final parts of the puzzle, a knock echoed through the door. He looked up to see a figure standing in the doorway, silhouetted by the dim light of the hallway. The figure stepped forward, revealing the face of a man Owens had never seen before, but whose presence filled him with a sense of dread. "Detective Owens," the man said, his voice smooth and calm. "I think we need to talk." The man introduced himself as Frank Bennett, a former inmate of the prison. Bennett had been released years ago, but he still had unfinished business that had brought him back to the prison. He claimed to know the real reason behind the deaths. But before he could explain, Bennett's demeanor shifted, his calm mask slipping to reveal something far darker. He leaned forward, his eyes locked onto Owens, with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. John Blackwell didn't die when the prison closed, Bennett whispered. He's still alive. And he's been using the prison as his personal hunting ground, luring people in, one by one. The hauntings weren't just stories. They were a cover for what was really happening. Bennett explained that Blackwell had been using the ghost stories as a distraction, manipulating the city's fear of the supernatural to carry out his twisted crimes. The disappearances weren't the result of hauntings. They were the result of Blackwell's sadistic pleasure in torturing his victims. The prisoners had been his first targets, but over time, Blackwell had expanded his reach, pulling in anyone with a connection to the prison. Bennett had narrowly escaped Blackwell's clutches years ago, but the memories haunted him. He had spent years trying to forget, but now he couldn't shake the feeling that Blackwell was still out there, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Owens listened in horror as Bennett detailed the events that led to the night when Blackwell finally snapped. He had killed without mercy, using the prison's labyrinthine structure to hide his victims, their bodies lost to time and decay. As Owens pieced together the details, he learned just how Blackwell had lured his victims into the prison. The story was even more twisted than he could have imagined. Blackwell had always used the ghost stories surrounding the prison to his advantage. He spread rumors of strange noises, sightings of shadowy figures, and unexplained cold spots. People, desperate for answers or driven by curiosity, came to investigate. Some were former prisoners. Others were family members, like Clara Hayes, who had come searching for her father's lost records. Each one was a step closer to their death. The lure was always the same: the promise of uncovering the truth, the myth that the prison was haunted. They thought they were hunting for ghosts, but Blackwell knew better. He knew that fear was the perfect bait. The prison itself became his hunting ground. It was a maze dark, corners, long hallways, and abandoned rooms. The lights were never fully on, the shadows deep. He didn't need supernatural forces to scare them. The prison itself was a deadly trap, and Blackwell used it like a master predator. When they entered, they'd be led down corridors where the air felt heavier, colder. Their footsteps echoed. Blackwell always watched from the shadows. When they were alone and vulnerable, he'd strike. The first victim was a former guard, a man named Roger Price. He'd come to the prison hoping to find something, anything, to explain the strange disappearances. But Price was an easy target. Blackwell ambushed him in the old cell blocks places, once used for solitary confinement, now abandoned and forgotten. It was there, in the dark, that Blackwell attacked. He suffocated Price with a cloth, holding him down with brutal force. The terror in the guard's eyes was enough to fuel Blackwell's sadistic pleasure. He didn't leave until Price's body went limp. Then, he dragged the body to the old storage rooms, leaving it behind to rot. The pattern repeated, but each time, Blackwell grew bolder. He found new ways to torment them. Sometimes, he'd lock them in a small dark room and let them think they were alone only for him to appear silently from the shadows. He'd strangle them, using a tight rope. He loved to hear them gasp for breath, the moment when they realized it was too late to escape. Clara Hayes came to the prison, looking for closure, for answers. She'd heard rumors of her father's final moments inside those walls, and she had to know the truth. Blackwell knew she was coming. He'd been watching her for weeks, tracking her every move. He'd sent anonymous letters, pretending to be a sympathetic ally, urging her to come to the prison. The more she searched, the more desperate she became. And in the end, it was that desperation that made her an easy target. When Clara entered the prison, she was drawn to the old guard towers. Blackwell had already set his trap. He'd been waiting for her, hidden in the shadows of the crumbling tower. As soon as Clara stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind her, locking her in. She didn't have a chance. Blackwell moved fast. He grabbed her from behind, choking her into unconsciousness with the same rope he used before. But before she passed out, Clara's last sight was his Fictional remorse. No pity, just cold, calculating cruelty. He left her body behind, concealed in the tower. The shadows were her final refuge. Now Owens was deep in the investigation, closer than anyone had come to uncovering Blackwell's crimes. Blackwell didn't need anyone to find Clara's body. He knew it would only be a matter of time before someone connected the dots. That someone was Owens. Blackwell had been watching him too. He knew Owens was getting closer. Every time Owens walked into the prison, Blackwell was watching from the shadows. He was always one step ahead, knowing where the detective would go next, what questions he would ask. Blackwell had eyes everywhere, informants within the police, people who still feared him, people he had bribed into silence. Owens had gotten too close. Blackwell knew it was only a matter of time before he'd be caught, but that wasn't going to happen. Not yet. Owens had made the mistake of thinking he was in control, but Blackwell had always been the one pulling the strings. The moment Owens arrived at the prison and stepped into the control room, his senses on high alert, he felt the change in the air. The temperature dropped. The silence was thick. And then, it happened. Blackwell lunged from the shadows, faster than Owens could react. Before Owens even saw him, the detective felt a cold iron grip on his throat. His hands went instinctively to Blackwell's arm, trying to break free. But Blackwell's strength was overwhelming. The struggle was brutal. Owens fought back, but Blackwell had the advantage. The detective's vision blurred as he gasped for air, his hand gripping the cold steel of a nearby chair, but it was no use. Owens' last moments were filled with the sound of Blackwell's mocking laughter. He hadn't just planned to kill him. He'd planned to humiliate him, to make Owens feel as powerless as all the victims he had tortured before. The detective's struggles grew weaker, his strength ebbing away until the room went dark. And just like that, the prison claimed another victim, its legacy of horror continuing as the walls whispered of crimes that would never be fully revealed. Want more stories like this? Please like and subscribe.